hand.
Wow, like Winston Churchill in the darkest hour.
All right.
I thought that was great.
Good evening and welcome to the Northampton School Board meeting for Thursday, November 15th, 2018. We'll call to the meeting to order at 7:03. As usual, we begin with approval of minutes, starting with October 16th budget work session.
Move we approve the minutes for October 16th budget work session.
All right. Do we have a second?
Second.
Hello, Aaron. Any questions, corrections, modifications to the first set of minutes?
Just one small typo in the first second paragraph where it says the third line down, claims history which have been high throughout as opposed to though out.
Okay.
Proving that I'm really reading.
Do you read
Good
every
catch.
word in there?
Got another one.
All right. In anything else for October 16th? No. All those in favor? Thank you. And we have the October 18th, public and non-public minutes.
Move we approve the October 18th public and non-public minutes.
A second.
All right. Any, Cindy?
I have two little things. Underneath correspondence and commendations, where it says the second point for our fall coaches instead of coachers. And it's and cross-country coach, Dana Hanson-Babiak, runners coach.
And is it Lisa Noonan? It's Noonan. And then,
Noonan.
Coach Lisa Noonan, not Nunesh.
And then,
Coach Noonan and cross-country coach Dana Hanson-Babiak.
and then on the second page, it should be Climate and Culture Committee as opposed to the Climate and Control Committee.
Climate Control Committee would be ambitious. All
Yes,
right.
sir, everywhere.
Any other corrections for October 18th? No? All those in favor?
So I wasn't here for the non-public, can I?
Sorry, we'll make that one change. Oh, no, that's, yeah, you can still vote yes. Yeah, thanks. All right, October 23rd, we have another budget work session set of minutes.
I move we approve the October 23rd work session minutes.
I second.
Any corrections, changes? No? All right, all those in favor? Thank you. And one more, October 29th budget work session.
Move we approve the October 29th work session minutes.
I second.
Anything? No? All those in favor? Abstentions? One, thank you. All right, that's it for the minutes. Correspondence commendations.
Thank you. I have a few. Very excited about our commendations this month. First of all, for our Veterans Day Assembly. Our students are 7th and 8th grade student government students. I can certainly provide the name. I don't have them with me tonight, so I apologize. But they did a fantastic job, along with their student government advisors, one of whom's sitting to my right. The other is Denise Pasden. They did a fantastic job helping to get the students organized. But several special moments, one of which was having 8 sailors from the USS New Hampshire join us. So that was very special. In addition to a flag, I don't know whose idea it was, but it was a fantastic idea. There was a flag in the cafeteria that is made up of a few hundred or so hands. On each hand is a message to a veteran or a service person from our students. And it is the Stars and Stripes. So
Cool.
Mrs. Zavis gave us that idea.
That
She did some nice
is
research for
Marcia.
us, and yes,
yes, I'm going to get to the talent show in a second.
And the students
and
created it.
mention her ad-lib monologue, which was amazing and inspirational. But yeah, so that's a great idea. It's in the cafeteria if you want to catch a glimpse if you haven't seen it yet.
we'll put a picture on the website as well. now
Great.
that I've learned
Thank
that.
Thank you, Beth. All right. Yes.
As soon as I get that figured out.
Pick that up. All right. Thank you. So Red Ribbon Week, going back, and I haven't mentioned this. I didn't, it happened after last month's meeting, but the 6th grade took care of Red Ribbon Week, which included a Spirit Week and the Friday Assembly. And Red Ribbon Week, the whole theme, saying no to drugs, saying, drug-free and healthy, and making, healthy choices and living a healthy lifestyle. Great for young people to learn. The sixth graders took it on along with their teachers. So Trish Johnston, Chris LaCroix, and Brenda Tharp did a great job. The highlight,
Donnelly.
and I'm sorry, Tracy, and Jen Donnelly, thank you, and Jen Donnelly. The highlight of it was the red ribbon. So everyone, after the Friday assembly, we went out back, whichever direction that is, and formed a red ribbon with the entire school. And we had a photo taken from the roof, and that picture made it onto the website and was tweeted out and all
I've seen it.
that stuff.
Super
So,
cool.
yeah, it's great. So there's a highlight. And last but not least, the talent show last night. I had a great time. Seemingly everyone had a great time. Each and every performance, was an inspirational highlight. And I want to thank Marcia Zavez, who had to fill some time and provided us with a very impromptu but inspirational speech about the arts. So I like that. Dan Singer, who was in the booth up above, and two parent volunteers, Paula Casilius and Ellen Safronis, helped out.
Great.
So, and thank you, and appreciation for all the 5th through 8th grade students who performed.
And helped behind the scenes. We had students who were also helping behind the scenes. So it was,
Thank you.
to me, one of the certainly it showed the depth of talent among our student population, but the kids in the audience who were cheering so loudly for the kids on stage, I'm not known to be a very emotional person, as you all well know, and I was kind of a mess. I was like just this wet mess because it was so.
When they all started.
Yeah, it was moving. I mean, they were so excited for one another as much as they were for themselves, and that's really special. That says a lot about our student body. I just want to say a thank you to our preschool team. As you may or may not know, because we don't talk a lot about preschool, but it's a very important part of our school. We've had 2 long-term subs, and they have done an amazing job. So we've needed a long-term sub for our lead teacher, along with a long-term sub for our educational associate. So that's a tall order for anybody. And so Ellen Safronis is the lead teacher, and Megan Chartier and Stephanie Somerville have all worked together to provide amazing programming for our preschool.
I can back you up.
Yeah,
They have.
so I just wanted to say kudos to them because it's tough coming in anyway as a sub. It can be,
They've
everybody says, oh, preschool, they're so cute. Well, they're also really busy. And it's their first school experience, and far exceeded any expectation I've had. So
And they
big
work
kudos to them.
long hours. When I come back here at 4 o'clock, 4:30, they are still here working.
Yep.
So
So kudos to them.
Thank you very much. All right.
I have one.
Yes,
Is there-
please.
I think this past weekend, the 7th grade robotics club
Wow, yep.
We should have said that.
competed at the regionals and came in 2nd place.
Wow.
So they move on to the finals. I think it's in Wyndham
Nice.
this coming weekend.
Okay.
So that's
The
the same robotics
state final, is
club
a
and-
state final?
Yeah.
Okay,
That's been going on for the past couple of years.
great.
So it's good to see that continuing, and it's a
It's a great
large
program.
commitment on some parent volunteers. And Mike Ambrosi and Ann Ambrosi were doing it in the past, and I think the Maloney's have stepped up this year and are
Love to get
hosting.
some-
And
Great.
so
Yeah.
Some more
All right.
details.
Yeah,
I'll have to get
we
some
had
more
it for our
details for
morning
next month,
announcement, so I
because
apologize, but we will. We'll
We
get
should have shared that
details.
out.
Okay.
Thank you, Greg.
Anyone else? No, all right. Moving on. Questions and comments from those in attendance? Yes.
Going
Oh,
back to
sorry.
the commendations, it seems like we share those in the school board meeting, but do they get shared out to the community at large? Is there an opportunity to maybe post those on the website or something? Because it is nice
Could
for
be.
people to see that they're appreciated, who are putting all of this work into these efforts.
I include them in a weekly that I send out to the staff and faculty.
Oh, good.
But often I don't include them in what's sent out to the parents or the community, so.
Yeah, that's a great
great
suggestion,
idea.
that whatever
Start doing that,
commendations we
yeah.
make here, we can put out in our
Yeah.
newsletter to the
Yeah.
community.
I could start
I
doing
write
that.
personal notes to all of them every month.
That's nice.
I don't know if you knew that, but that's nice.
I
I
know,
always
because you
take them
wrote
down
me
and send
one,
them all
thank you very
personal
much.
cards. Pardon?
I said, I know, because he wrote me one time, thank you very much.
When you received a commendation, yes, I
But I
did.
do like that idea of the larger community knowing, right? Because if you're a middle school parent, you might not know what's happening in preschool.
Yeah.
And
Right.
it all ties us together. So I think that's
That's a
It's
great
for
idea,
community
thanks.
building.
All right, questions, comments from those in attendance? Marcia? We'll call up Rick.
Rick is up.
I'm Rick Stanton. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me the opportunity to speak. And don't know all of you, but I've met some of you, Dr. Anderson and the folks from the budget over there. We just got the books. I'm a member of the Budget Committee. I was a former selectman, and I'm here to undo a mistake I made a couple of years ago, and that is by not politicking enough for a position of the school resource officer. This is something that I've seen great use for. I am what's known as a court-appointed advocate for children. So working with schools, I've worked with SROs, and I see their value. A few years ago, probably not so much, but with the opioid crisis, it's something that I think really needs our attention, and this would be a good way to help. I'm going to pass out what is just my proposed citizens petition for you to look at, and what I'd ask you to do is to read it and
Thank
if you have any questions or comments,
It's good to share.
I will come back at
Yeah.
your December meeting and get your comments. I'm sure you're all aware of what a school resource officer does.
I've got two more here.
But in addition to that, we are going to use that person to be a beach patrol officer. Those of you that buy permits to go down to the beach and find that there's cars from Massachusetts parked in our spaces and it's not enforced. And the people that go by at 30, 40, and 50 miles an hour need some attention. A police presence will help with that. But most importantly, it's for the kids in the school and the parents to become more familiar with our police officers. And we have now the advantage of a new female police officer, which will be announced, I guess, on Monday. So and we have a new police chief, also a female, so that's a new look on everything, and she is supportive. I've talked to Dr. Anderson, he is supported, so if you would support it, mention it to your folks and to the teachers, and then I hope to try to get in touch with the parents at some meeting before March, before the voting day comes. A different change, when I proposed this, it was as a select board member, and I got the select board to agree and the budget committee to agree, but I never touched base with the school board, and I apologize for that. And this time I'm changing it to a citizen's petition, because there are a lot of folks that have indicated that they are interested in having both an SRO and a beach patrol officer. So
That's awesome.
thank you for a few moments, and I'll be
Sure,
happy
but
to answer
before
any
you
questions.
say any questions for Rick, and I'll just preface this, Rick and I have talked about this in the past, it came up in the budget committee, and my understanding is there was an SRO for the school
Yeah.
in the past, it was before I lived in town, so I wasn't familiar with it, but I've certainly heard about it.
Before
But that particular officer left the force, and so that was basically a gap that was never filled. But that the kids really, did have a great relationship with him, and I have a high schooler now, and I know they have a SRO at the high school, and he seems to have a great positive impact on the kids there, so.
It does depend on the individual.
Yeah,
And he was assigned as an SRO from their present staff. And when we had a staffing shortage, that was the position was cut in order to give services to the rest of the town. Now that we're nearly fully staffed, and then by doing it this way becomes the vote of the legislative body that, hey, police chief, you've got to provide these services. Doesn't have to be the same person, it'd probably be different people from now and then. It's written so as to give the chief the flexibility to do that. So, thank you. Any questions?
Yeah.
Please.
Hey, I could put you, I'm Ronnie Cataract, Assistant Superintendent, and I could put you in touch with Chief Robert Cormier, and he speaks nationally advocating for school resource officers.
Oh, sure.
And he's the Tilton Police Chief, and I'm sure he'd be happy to come and
Where is he a police chief?
Tilton, New Hampshire.
Oh, Tilton, yes.
I'll write down his cell phone. for
Okay,
you if you'd
all
like.
right. I'm also understand that the SRO at Winnacunnet is also a very popular and important resource over there, so I don't know who he is or whatever, but
Officer DeLuca.
yeah.
Maybe we can get him at parent pickup or drop off, make it smooth, right?
Wouldn't hurt. Wouldn't hurt. It's at the high school level.
for getting out of my
I know,
High
that's why I
school
said
level,
it.
but I've worked with 2 SROs at 2 different high schools,
Yeah.
most successfully, and the students really took a shine to the person, or the people that were.
I saw it from
were
the other
impressed.
side up in Portsmouth, is that they already had their eyes on the troublemakers before they got to Portsmouth High School, so, and that helped.
I
So-
like
Yeah.
how it's structured so that it's also the beach patrol, because I think having an eye on who's kind of hanging out at the beach and already knowing some of those kids from the school, it's helpful for everybody.
Yes,
And I think it's helpful for
yes.
some students who may have a few more challenges to know that there's an extra set of eyes on them.
All right. Any other questions for Rick? No? Great. Thanks for coming, Rick.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you. I'll be in touch.
All right, moving on, we have our education update, school council.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. A very brief update on the school council. I think the highlight of our meeting yesterday was talking about feedback on six areas in particular. The school picnic at the beginning of the year. So the full faculty, every staff member provided feedback and their thoughts on the school picnic. Just a general summary is the staff wants to see the picnic return to a Thursday rather than a Friday. And as we're talking about the school calendar, that certainly is coming up at the SAU level as well. The placement process, we had a transition meeting that people were asked to provide feedback on. Yeah, and it was held last June, and essentially, generally speaking, the feedback is useful, but the timing was not as useful. Can we do it at the very beginning of the year? So in other words, in that structure, it would be last year's kindergarten teachers in late August, early September, meeting with the first grade teachers when the first graders have just entered their classrooms. So we'll look to make an adjustment there. The scheduling process and how we built the schedule generally, the format and process was well received this year, with the teachers having some freedom to schedule where they thought the core subjects would go best around the unified arts, which was set first. So the unified arts schedule, pre-K, K through 8 was set, and the teacher teams were able to set their schedule with administrative assistance. School assemblies, we have our community meetings, so teachers have been asked to provide feedback on the community meetings and other school assemblies. Curriculum night, which was held last month, and our early release schedule, how we structure unified arts classes on early release days. So this is all collaborative decision-making and shared governance, and so an opportunity for everyone to have a voice. So that's been very well received. Other things, we just talked about briefly, blizzard bags. We're just talking about it preliminarily. What are blizzard bags? Hampton Falls does blizzard bags successfully. So when we have a school cancellation, they put the blizzard bags into effect, and it can be counted as an attendance day. All right, so again, preliminary discussions. The school calendar, I think all of you know that the joint board approved the SAU 21 calendar for next year. So we're now talking about how our calendar fits, whether we'll adopt that calendar without any adjustments, and what adjustments people would like to see, if any. And we talked, we get an open circle update that's going quite well. We like what we're seeing K through 5. We have a standing open circle task force committee that meets regularly, monthly, with a representative from each grade, K through 5. And that's our council meeting.
All right. Any questions for Eric on?
That's good.
Okay. Or Tracy or-
I did have a question about the early release structure. Is that, how is it working right now? Is the kids are doing a whole day into, like, each period is shortened? Or for like unified arts and stuff?
Unified arts are shortened.
Shortened.
Yes, yes.
Okay. And do you
So
feel
that-
like that's been working well, or?
I think from the unified arts teacher's perspective, it's been working well.
Yeah. There's pros and cons to
Yeah.
the different models that we've been looking at, and the faculty has been really great about having open conversations about the pros and cons of each possible way that we could do things. It's valuable for the UA teachers who very often see the students on such a limited time each week to be able, they want to have that touch base. It also provides planning time for teachers. It does make the students' days a little bit more chopped
I know.
up. So we're trying to balance all that and have conversations and try and figure out what's best for the kids. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
For example, with Fridays, if a unified art meets on Fridays, we would have had 2 early releases already in which that class would have been cut entirely. And rather than having seen their students 7, maybe 8 times by now, it would have been 5 or 6.
Yep,
Total.
makes sense.
Yeah,
So-
so it's trying to balance everything.
Yeah, there's like 14 either early release days or holidays that are Fridays. So that class, whatever that class is that has art, they would just miss it altogether, or
That makes
gym or
sense.
whatever.
Yep.
And they're still, I mean, they're still getting a little bit less, right?
Yeah, it's definitely less time.
Less,
It is less
Absolutely.
time, yeah.
Yeah. It's an abbreviated class period.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions on school council? All right, moving on.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Do you have copies of the agenda for the public?
Oh. Usually they're on a chair
The
by the door, but I
superintendent
don't.
has them in his book, and he's not here yet, but he's coming from another
share.
meeting.
I'll read it and I'll give it back.
Oh, that's, no, no, keep it.
Nope, he didn't put them in
I'm
mine.
good.
All right. Thank you, Erin. Continuing business, board goals. I don't have any specific updates on this since we're in the midst of budget season. I haven't thought much about these in the last month, I have to admit. I think because they're tied, we did that work to tie them into the SIP plan. They're all things that are happening. But I was happy to see the superintendent's parent forum a couple of weeks ago. I thought that was successful and something new for us and different. And I know Bill mentioned to me he found it very informative. So moving on to proposed warrant articles. With our budgets, we did not talk about warrant articles in great detail. If you go into your packet,
It's right after the minutes.
right after the minutes, thank you very much. So, I'll pass it over to Matt in just a second, but this is a list of the potential warrant articles that we would have on the March ballot. So, pass it over to Matt to cover.
Yes, so the first proposed 2019-2020 warrant article would be the CBA, collective bargaining agreement with our teachers union, C. We anticipate that tentative agreement, we hope that tentative agreement will be ratified at some point in the near future. However, at this point, we don't have those details or the dollar amount. However, I will note that our last CBA in 2017 was $108,000, just as a point of reference, but that it's no indication of what this warrant article will be.
Okay.
Additionally, we are recommending a long-term maintenance warrant article.
It says number 2 here, CBA warrant with language for special meeting. What does that mean?
So we are recommending we add a warrant article that would allow for a special meeting should the CBA fail. So in the event that the CBA fails and this warrant article passes, we could put on, the school board could call a special meeting to approve the CBA. Kind of a second chance. We want to have full buy-in from all the boards, because this really needs everyone's support, as well as C's support, because there is a cost component, because there will be a special meeting that will need to be held, as well.
Sorry, go ahead.
Additionally, there is a factor with our district in that means that there'll be 4 CBA warrant articles in each town. Even though this is just
Two on the
language.
local ballot and 2 on the
Two on
Winnicott.
Winnicott. So there is the concern that it could confuse voters. And we'd certainly do our best to educate people, but we certainly don't want to hinder the effort to pass the CBA.
So 2 questions about that. What form does a special meeting take? Is it just another election, or is it more like a
Town
deliberative
meeting.
session type town meeting? Okay,
Town meeting.
okay. And suppose the first warrant article with the contract fail, would the warrant for the special meeting have to be approved in every town the same way our CBA needs to be approved in every town?
From what I understand, it needs to be approved across all districts.
So all the districts would have to have a special meeting, and then all
Correct.
would have to then approve it through that special town meeting.
Correct. So it's a little more complex in our district. Approximately just under 70% of school districts do this, or SAUs do this across the state.
Okay.
Again, we're a little different. That's probably why we haven't done it in the past, but we're bringing it up as a point of conversation because it does make sense in many ways. So.
Any questions about those before we move on to the other ones? No? Okay. All right, thanks, Matt.
You're
Long-term
welcome.
maintenance?
So we are recommending a long-term maintenance warrant article, which is our annual warrant article for different maintenance jobs. This year, that will include garage repairs and updates to the siding and the roof, seal coating of the west side parking lot and courtyard, as well as the replacement of the accordion wall between the gym and the music room. That amount is $65,000. The next warrant article is the roof replacement. This would be the shingle roof that is on the back side of the main building. We do have a roof plan that's included in your budget book. I believe there is one more roof that needs to be replaced after this one, and that is a year or 2 down the road. The next set.
I just wanted to
Yes.
mention, for both of those were both, all those maintenance items and the roof replacement were items that were passed on to the CIP committee for the town, Capital Improvement Plan Committee, which reviewed and recommended them for approval. So that's anyone who reviews the CIP will see all those projects in there. Thanks.
Thank you. The next set of warrant articles are the expendable trust funds. So as you know, these are the trusts that we set up as sort of contingency in the event of unanticipated costs or just items that require immediate funding. This includes the Special Education Expendable Trust, which we are recommending to only fund via unreserved fund balance. We have a balance of $231,000 in that account. We do not, in the last 2 years, we've had 2 warrant articles, one raise and appropriate and one unreserved fund balance. We feel that if we did a $75,000 unreserved fund balance warrant article, that will suffice for this year.
Sorry, you said the balance is what, 231?
231.
Okay, thanks.
Additionally, we have a health insurance expendable trust. This is, the purpose of this fund is in the event of, a high health insurance rates or unexpected changes in health plans. For example, there have been some health plan changes this year that have gone over budget, which I'll address in the expenditure report, due to, different family events, whether that's childbirth or marriage, etc., or just changing plans for personal reasons. We're recommending adding an additional $25,000 to this trust. The current balance is $119,000. And the last expendable trust is the building maintenance trust. We are at $151,000, and we're recommending an additional $25,000 to that trust.
Question about health insurance. When do we find out the actual health insurance increase?
That'll be in March. Were you hoping for January?
Yes, I was hoping for January, so we'd know whether we're tapping it. If you recall, we budgeted for half the GMR, projected GMR of 18.5%. We budgeted for half, and if it comes in above that level, we would anticipate tapping that health insurance trust fund.
So,
That being the case, well, we won't know the GMR. Should we look at more than $25,000 for the health insurance trust?
we could. I'm looking at historical GMRs. I'm hoping for approximately 4%. No, 4% decrease.
That'd be wonderful.
If you could get 4, wow.
4 or 5% decrease. Additionally, as we go through the year, if we recognize savings elsewhere in the budget, we may not need to take out as much of the healthcare. That's a decision as we go forward through the year. That being said, this is a valuable trust, because I think we all anticipate that health premiums are only going to increase over the next foreseeable future. So.
Matt, I'm trying to look it up, but I know two of these 3 funds have targets. Do you happen to know what they are off the top of your head?
Yes, so the special education target is 300. It's right after the blue sheet there.
Thanks.
And the building maintenance fund, I believe, is also, it's either 250 or 300.
Actually, it's 150.
Oh, is it 150?
And we have no target for the healthcare one.
Right.
Okay. Okay. So we're at the target right now for building maintenance.
Right. So in regard to that, we anticipate utilizing approximately $30,000 out of the building maintenance trust this year due to the PA clock system. We had applied to the public infrastructure fund. However, we did not receive funding through that grant program.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay.
and that is certainly. So that's the reasoning for the 25.
All right, so we would need, and you're not, and then, oh, sorry, well, why don't you cover the last 2 before we?
Right, so the last 2 warrant articles that we are recommending is the dissolution of the Energy Trust Fund. That was for the natural gas conversion, and we've completed that project. There's a current balance of $572, as well as the Building Expansion Capital Reserve Fund, and there's a balance of $283 in that fund. That is monies that will go back to the town.
Okay. So, assuming we are gonna wait on 1 and 2, we're looking for votes on 3 through 8, is that fair to say? Although, well, we could do 5, but you're saying that we probably don't need to do 2 sped warrant articles for this year?
I would recommend not doing a raise and appropriate.
Okay.
I do not think it's necessary.
Okay. So we have basically a handful to consider if we want to discuss further and/or vote on these tonight. We would see them in their final written form probably in January, is that when?
If the
Yeah, I
public
think-
hearing.
Yeah, the public hearing for January. We'll just go through them one at a time. Any questions about the long-term maintenance? Do we have a motion?
I move that we establish a warrant article for long-term maintenance in the amount of $65,000.
Second.
Any questions? All those in favor? Great, thank you. Roof replacement? Any questions? No? Do we have a motion?
I move that we establish a warrant article for the replacement of the roof in the amount of $60,000. Not the whole roof, part of the roof.
Do we have a second?
A second.
All right. Gotta be quicker, Aaron. All those in favor? Would we everyone agree that we don't need to do 2 sped this year? 'Cause the 75 would take us, if we do a 75, it would take us to our target, so move on to number 6 for the, out of the expendable trust funds, which come from the unreserved fund balance, assuming we have some at the end of the year. Do we have a motion on the sped?
Are those 3 separate motions
They
or
would,
one?
yes, they would be 3 separate
Okay.
articles.
And how much was to be at, where are we for the special
So-
education?
Where our balance is 231 right now, our target is 300,
We're
so
proposing
75K would put us just over 300.
I move that we establish a warrant article for an expendable trust fund for sped at the amount of $75,000.
Second the motion.
All right, all those in favor? Okay. Health insurance, we don't have a target for this fund, and I'd be comfortable with the 25. My only question is if we think we may have to tap that this year. I mean, both from the possibility through our budget and also Matt mentioning that, do we want to consider making that a little bit higher?
What's the 9%? What would that equate to?
It's about 85,000.
$85,000.
I think we should make it a little bigger.
Me too.
And we can't
And-
move, we can't move money from one warrant to another, it has to go.
N-
to the
No.
warrant.
Yeah, and the important thing to note is the order in which these appear on the ballot is important, because if we don't have enough in the unreserved fund balance to cover them all, they would get funded in the order in which they were listed on the ballot. So we would need to prioritize them on the ballot as well as that, yeah.
I think so too.
Please.
Yes.
So, yeah. 50, I'm trying to recall where we've averaged on our unreserved fund balance the last few years. I know it's been in the a little over 100 range probably, right?
More than
More
100.
than that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the average is probably, before we withdraw, we're probably in the, like 200.
200, okay, all right, so that we have some breathing room to add more, so, Tom, were you gonna suggest 50 for that?
Yeah, so I guess 50 or 75, I mean, it's gotta,
Yeah.
we're planning on taking 80 out, I understand we don't know yet. With the volatility of healthcare and the obligation we have by contract, I think we need to beef it up.
We have a balance of 119.
Yeah, minus 80.
Yeah.
Right,
Could be minus 85, yeah,
Yeah.
if,
Mm.
so. I'd be comfortable with 75.
yeah.
It goes into a fund, it's there for future rainy days, so it's not like it's
Will be spent.
being spent
Yeah.
on something else other than potential healthcare costs, so.
Yeah, I'd be comfortable with 75 as well.
Do we have a motion on, to that extent?
I move that we establish a warrant article for the expendable trust fund to cover health insurance in the amount of $75,000.
Have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye, okay. And building maintenance? I'm comfortable with the 25.
Yeah.
Does anyone has any stronger thoughts? I mean, we've tapped into this a few times, but we've been able to keep it at a reasonably healthy. Did it for the septic system, I believe, and.
Which is something that might be on our radar, right? Is that-
Septic?
No, that's in the budget, I think.
Is it in the budget?
Yeah,
Oh, we were talking
yeah.
about it in the budget.
No, we had a, couple of years ago, there was an unexpected
Backup.
failure of the pumps in the septic system, which were big and expensive and needed to be replaced, obviously, quickly, so we tapped into this fund.
There's a slight increase to the operating budget this year, or proposed operating budget, yes, for additional pumping of the septic.
So I guess, so the only question I have, if I may, is why we don't have a target for the health trust and whether other districts do? Because that might help guide us in the future.
So so it's the board's prerogative to set a target. The Winnicott is the only other district within SAU 21 that has this type of trust. However, we will be recommending establishing one in the other 3 districts. Winnicott's target is, I want to say 150. It's less than, I know it's less than the special education trust.
Wow.
So
Considering their size, that's not much.
Yeah.
that was a newly established 2 years ago. So I think it was the year we had the 22.8% GMR. So I think it was starting slow, and that was more of an informal target.
Yeah.
I would recommend going higher than 150.
Well, I would agree. I mean, our healthcare line is now in excess of $1 million. So another 23% GMR could be, if you wanted to, again, do the same thing where you're taking half of that, you're well over $100,000 into that, if that's the kind of increase you're getting hit with. So, we can consider that now or at a later date, but I think it's worthwhile to think about whether we should set a target for that.
Yeah, so I think we should add, I don't know that I'm prepared to throw a dart at a board to come up with a number tonight.
Come on.
But, I know, I'm just saying. But could you think a little bit on that, help us think through that a little bit, Matt? About what maybe we should have it be relative to a percentage of the overall line item?
Right, so for special education, the $300,000 was arrived at because that was considered kind of a worst case a single out of district placement worst case scenario. I'll take a look at the health insurance and see if I can find a line of reasoning that would make sense for health insurance as well. So.
Thanks. All right. Back to building, did we do the building maintenance
didn't
one?
make a-
Okay. So, building maintenance, are we comfortable with 25? Anyone? Any different thoughts? No? Okay. I'll send it.
I move that we create a warrant article for building maintenance at the amount of $25,000.
I second.
All those in favor? Thank you. And then, we want to dissolve these 2 remaining funds, which are legacy funds. We have a motion. Tom, you moving? One
To
of them?
dissolve the Energy Trust Fund and the Building Expansion Capital Reserve Fund.
Got to do them one at a time, Tom.
All right, dissolve the Energy Trust Fund.
We have a second?
I second.
All those in favor? Hit it again, Tom.
Dissolve the building, I move that we dissolve the Building Expansion Capital Reserve Fund.
I second.
All those in favor? All right, thank you all very much.
Where's that leftover money go?
Back to the town.
Taxpayers. You'll get it.
It's the offset assessment.
Look for your refund check in the mail. All right, the proposed budget, everyone got updated budget pages. You also have an updated spreadsheet. I believe the latest and greatest is in your packet. We took a preliminary vote on a budget amount after our last meeting, but this has the most up-to-date numbers. As you may recall, we kind of revisit this vote a few times as things change, so we're gonna revisit this vote again, but before we get to that, are there any questions about any of the updated changes or pages or information that we got after our last work session?
Will the two recent resignations affect this at all?
They've-
Which,
Yeah.
Retirement.
Actually, they have, the technology integration salary was adjusted to reflect.
that
being
is,
higher.
that position's included. What the
other
one? What's the other one?
The
Facilities.
facilities manager.
That is not in here. However, that's, right, th- I'm trying to think,
Well, I would recommend actually we keep that where we're at, because that's not on a salary schedule like a contracted staff position.
right.
So, you know, we
That's
may
fine.
end up bringing someone in with experience at that level. We don't
Makes
really
sense.
know, as opposed to sort of being able to look at a schedule on a step chart and say, we can guess that the person coming in is gonna have this experience and this much.
So, yeah, so that's what I was just running through my mind, is that, cause we just did a salary comparison, analysis. And the current salary, for the facilities director is in line. So I'm fairly confident that we should be able to find someone at a similar rate. So I think it's appropriate to keep it. And as far as a buyout goes, that can, I'm confident that can come out of this year's budget. It's a limit, it's not as substantial as, the teachers' buyouts. So,
Sorry, a buyout of,
He's moving to Winnicott.
correct. However, currently, each district, we are looking to change this, however, each district is individual. So when they leave one district and go, even if it's within SAU 21, they are eligible for a buyout of their vacation time.
accumulated vacation time.
They will not, they will lose,
Yeah.
it does not go with them, so he'll lose longevity, he'll lose sick and vacation when he goes to Winnicott.
Okay.
So,
Okay,
however, we are looking at, for our non-union staff members, starting July 1st of 2019, is to change that, to be more friendly to our employees and to provide those benefits, to extend it across districts, so.
okay. Other questions about the budget as it currently is constituted? Anyone? Last call? All right. We have a motion to approve.
This one? I move we approve the budget at the amount of $9,143,859.
Second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? Great, thank you.
Excuse me.
Yes. Yes.
Just so that the number is
9 million.
9,143,859.
Correct.
And we'll probably revisit that 2 or 3 times.
That's what it is today.
Starting on Monday.
Yes. Okay, we've done that. On to new business. You have a 3-year technology plan in your packet. You want an overview of this, or do you, if you've read it, do you have any questions?
So we were actually hoping to have Danielle, our systems admin, come tonight to present. Unfortunately, she is out sick with the flu. However, I did want to note that this is an initiative that the SAU's pushing across all the districts to implement technology plans. We do feel that this is a best practice and a good way to plan for, as well as you can plan for technology for the next 3 years. I will note that this is not, we are not asking for the board's absolute approval for every item. in this plan. These are guideposts. This is a plan that's meant to be adjusted and changed and adapt as technology changes and our student and teacher needs adjust. So although there are budget figures here, these are not absolutes. These are rough numbers based on current year needs and what we project out for the next 3 years. I think Eric may have a little more to add.
There's a whole lot of narrative here, so I hope that you've had a chance to take a look at it. I want to mention that our technology committee consists of several people, ourselves, Danielle Brown, our systems administrator, Megan Wyman, she was here, and the new person will be included on this committee. Matt Ferrer was at multiple meetings, and several teachers. I hasten to mention any of their names for fear of leaving someone out. But for example, Chris LaCroix, Brenda Eves, Carrie Ann O'Donnell, Coronado, I don't know what I was thinking of, sorry about that. And I've forgotten one. But I was thinking, looking at the front page, that we should list those team members. So we can certainly make that adjustment. But we're talking about personalization and flexibility, with the major initiatives being one-to-one for middle school, and in terms of the items, but it also hastens the incorporation of a flexible approach in terms of pedagogy for teaching styles and student learning styles. So we're very high on that as well. The figures that are in Appendix A, you will see they do, with the implementation of the one-to-one, especially on page 1, they do graduate in terms of downward, in terms of the number of units that would be budgeted for, that are planned for in this tech plan. They graduate downward as we have Apple devices with an expected life of 5 to 6 years and a 3-year rotation, 6, 7, 8. Then the number that are required to be purchased will less and less. With 21, 22, which is not part of this tech plan, depending upon replacements, we wouldn't need to buy a number of laptops for an entire entering 6th grade. That number could be as little as 0 that year, depending. So an important part of it, an important part of this is the redistribution of the laptops that come off the top, if you will. For our purposes here, the MacBook Pros. This summer, assuming the proposed budget is passed, we'll have 30, more likely plus, but 30 plus or minus MacBook Pros that are redistributed to 3rd and 4th grade. So that's a big part of it.
I'd also like to point out that I was really impressed with the collaborative process that Northampton really utilized in developing this plan. It was far more inclusive of really the entire different members of the school than some of the other districts that went through this same process. So it was really great to see, from my perspective, to see many different viewpoints and really helping with this process. Additionally, we are asking for approval of this plan. This is not required by the state. However, there is a disaster recovery component of this plan that is recommended by our auditor, Plodzik and Sanderson. If you recall, during our questionnaire, we're asked that question whether we have a disaster recovery plan. So we have incorporated that in the tech plan. So we would like approval either at this meeting, or we can bring it forth at the next meeting so that you have the opportunity to read through a little more in detail.
And if I may, the other member is Dan Singer. Sorry, Dan. Tom.
Two questions if I may. Matt, so assume the board's committed, the school's committed to this going forward past 2021. And to Dr. Anderson's point, because of the life cycle, we may not need to purchase anything in 2021, 22. Is there a way to keep a line item in the budget so that we're not, slingshotting back and forth so that,
Absolutely.
Okay. I think I would highly recommend that so we're not sticker shock again, because if we're committed, set the money aside.
Right. So I mean, it's really best practice to have a replacement cycle to smooth out those spikes, which we do intend to maintain through actually with all our districts for all our one-to-one initiatives. So.
My second question, go ahead.
On that note, Tom, so one thing that we've set aside for the first year of the one-to-one is the replacement of the intermediate grade laptops and some 8 and 9-year-old first-generation iPads in the primary grade. So we set that aside. So there's, along those lines, there's always technology, that's either new or burgeoning or necessary for us to invest in.
So the second part is, this brings the technology into the building. I'm still unclear of how the technology ends up enhancing or improving instruction. So whether tonight or another night, if you could share a little bit about that, that'd be great.
I could speak to that a little bit. Obviously, I'm the teachers out there. Sorry, I'm sure I will leave things out because it wasn't something that I prepared ahead of time. But so we're 3 months into the initiative, and I have to say, when you're walking down the halls and looking into the classrooms in that middle school hallway, you would never know that this is something that's new to the classrooms. The students use them very, very frequently. The teachers rely on them. I would say the two biggest uses so far, this early in the year, is around Google Classroom and around coding. Those have been the two things that I've seen students most engaged with. The other things that I know we're either have already used or have in use on Macs and expecting in the very near future to be using are programs such as Scratch2, iMovie, Photos, Print Shop, Adobe Photoshop, MakerBot, SketchUp, Comic Life, Animationish, Kid Pix, Minecraft for Education, GarageBand, iBooks, Author, and Grapher. I just had that handy in an email because as we were recently talking about this. The student government, just speaking as my interactions with students with that, it was so fun planning our Veterans Day event, and the kids automatically ran and got their laptops, sat down, and they were creating flyers in Photoshop. They were getting onto Google and creating, collaborating on lists of who's going to bring what for the Veterans Picnic and who's going to take over what in the agenda. The middle school teachers have actively sought out, especially this summer and in recent months in professional development individually, to go to different workshops to learn more. And in fact, they last week provided just half an hour, but the elementary school teachers were wanting to learn some things. And so the middle school teachers stepped up and spent half an hour sharing what they've learned around some technology aspects with the elementary school faculty. So I think the learning curve has been huge, and they're excited about it. We've actually, in the last month, I've had both with math at the 6th and 7th grade level and ELA at the 6th grade level explore new online interactive tools to bring into the classroom in a really meaningful and planned, consistent way. So that's just off the top of my head.
To differentiate. I mean, I feel like
the personalization
more
is
in
huge.
ELA, but the teachers have done a lot of research on what can be used to really help differentiate to meet students where they are. So I know in 6th grade it's used quite a bit in terms of enhancing writing skills and working on that grammatical component, where some students might need more basic skill development and others are, far further along. So I am constantly impressed that our teachers are coming to us with new ideas and can we look at this and can we look at that and here's why. So that it is thoughtful for sure.
From my own opinion, is that while we have the tools here, I wanna make sure that if we need to make investment in people to be able to use the tools, that we're doing that as well. And that needs to be part of a plan and a process too. That's, however it's developed, collaboratively or.
There are,
Like, here's your first investment. So,
that's true.
and it's working really, really well.
There are elements of that, in here, Tom, on page 13. You can see two, Trish Johnston and Brenda Tharp are the two teachers who most recently went to a full-day Google Docs training. And both Becca and Tracy spoke to the interpersonal nature of how this can help with personalization of learning. One thing, when there are some places, but it won't be Northampton, where we introduce more technology and it depersonalizes teaching and learning. That's not going to happen on our watch or in this school. The teachers wouldn't have it. So you could hear how the introduction of these technologies so far has already increased the interpersonal nature of teaching and learning.
Yeah, let me just say, and I think it's alluded to because it's come on the conversations we had about the report. I mean, districts that I've seen that have more mature integration programs are further along, who've been successful because they essentially have integration specialists. And I know you've had that position, but one of the conversations we had is that your position's largely been tied up teaching elementary sections, not doing integration with teachers who have one-to-one devices, whose kids have one-to-one devices. And so that's the one area that stuck out for me in looking at what you were doing and a need down the road. It's not immediate,
Right.
because right now you're at this stage. It will be something that we'll need to discuss down the road. Either what that current position needs to morph into,
Yep.
or an additional person who really helps classroom teachers figure out how to use this device to enhance what they're doing in their classroom.
Thank you. Thanks.
Any more questions around the technology plan? No? So Matt did say they were looking for a vote to approve the technology plan as presented. Do we have a motion to that effect?
I move that we approve the Northampton School Technology Plan Revision 6 as presented.
All right, do we have a second? All those in favor?
Only 6.
Great, thank you very much. Our next item is discussion of a retirement incentive. This is something we've discussed the last couple of years in terms of providing or approving a retirement incentive beyond what is stipulated in the CBA for what would be defined as an eligible retiree. I believe we defined in terms of the age and years of service, those that would be eligible to take an incentive. Would it be offered? We've offered varying amounts over the last couple of years, from $5,000 up to $15,000. I don't know exactly what those, Matthew, I'm gonna ask, you might not know off the top of your head, but what were the parameters around which we approved last year?
It was 15 years service and 60.
Age 60?
Yes.
That's what I believe it was. So anyone who was 60 or more and had at least 15 years of service, I believe we approved a $15,000 incentive for retirement. 15,000, yep. And it- 59? Age 59? Is that what you?
59 last year. Was it 60?
Not sure. I
Fairly
thought 60.
certain it was-
I recall 60 and
Okay.
15 years service.
So we're bringing this up again this year to see if we want to offer, I know other districts have done similar things in the past, and I'll ask you, are other districts doing that so far this year?
Not currently, no.
Not currently.
Not an RSA.
Not an RSA.
Correct.
Okay.
I think it's a good idea.
All right.
To Greg's point, though, does it make sense to do it at 59? Because the amount could help people carry through to 59.5, and then they can tap into the,
Yeah.
right?
I don't know what the rules are around pensions versus personal
59
retirement
is
plans.
full.
I believe, everyone who met those two criteria was eligible to take their pension, is that correct? That was one of the reasons those criteria were chosen, but I don't know that for sure. And I'm looking at Matt again. Poor Matt.
I do not know off the top of my head,
Okay.
but I will
Um,
quickly go to the website.
And do we recall how many teachers we have that will meet this criteria?
Last year, at 60 and 15, we had 6 teachers eligible.
There are 11 this year.
There are 11 this year who will be
11 just hit
eligible.
60 this year?
Or 15 years of service. They might have already
Right,
been
who may
60,
not
but not
have-
had
right.
15 years of
Right.
service.
Right.
Is it both or is it one?
It's
Both.
both. You have to meet both criteria. And again, I do believe, because that was, people at that level were eligible to draw their pension under the state retirement system rules, which I am admittedly no expert on, so.
That would be a
No.
big blow if 11
My,
teachers.
That would be significant. Yes, Rana?
what I've seen in other collective bargaining agreements is that they put, they'll have a list. You get on the list, there's a certain deadline by putting your name on the list. It's first come, first serve to keep that from happening. So you'd set a cap and you would rotate through. You could be on that list per se 3 years. If you don't take it by the 3rd year, you start back at the bottom of the list. You know, larger districts would do that, or districts that would have up to 11 people that might want to. They'd say only this many can per year.
But those are collective bargaining agreements. That's the difference. That's how you're right.
But I'm
That's how,
saying you could use the language.
that's how they spelled it out in their
Right,
collective
you could
bargaining
use that,
agreement.
you could use that language to keep the cap from happening.
Well, my understanding
all
last year
11.
was that we could not, if we set criteria for eligibility, anyone who retires who meets that criteria is eligible for the incentive.
Yeah, otherwise,
So it would be a potential, yes, if all 11 staff members who are eligible retired, they would all be eligible to receive the stipend, and that would, be significant. But we also have, I wouldn't personally expect that. It's possible it could happen, I suppose. From a financial perspective, it's a significant amount of money, but we've also seen that there's, generally a trade-off between, someone who's retiring is at the top of the step and with longevity and stuff, and somebody coming in as a replacement is generally at a lower salary level. So we usually see that we can kind of pay for this out of the budget without having to increase the budget. In general, that's kind of what we've seen in terms of the dollars. So I don't think it would be a significant budgetary impact, but obviously if we had a number of retirements, that's a significant change. That's significant payout financially, and it's significant in terms of
Experience
changes,
and building.
experience and change within the staff
We
population.
can affect the amount that take it by, the demand by how much we offer as well.
Yep, we can
Go
offer.
all the way up
we-
to the 15.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
that's not the difference of you taking it. Could be the difference of nobody taking it. So you're suggesting lower the 15, so that's not as big a hit. I think we did that 2 years ago. We did the 10, right? And the word we got back was it wasn't that much of an incentive to do it. So last year we moved it to 15.
And they still didn't take it.
One person took it, right?
No, of the 6 I mentioned, none of them took it.
No one took it last year or qualified for it last year.
That was the year before, so,
Right. Time flies.
but, right,
So that didn't,
2 people did retire from Northampton, but not under the retirement incentive. So
when
of the,
Greg took it, what was that? 2 years ago, was it 15?
yeah, technically, I never,
I think
3
it's-
years
I
ago, it was
missed
10.
Brad.
Last year
so-
it was 15, before that it was
It's
10 or 5, I don't remember, it was 10 or 5, okay,
Yeah, we went 5, 10, 15.
yeah.
Yep.
It's on the budget.
Well, look, I understand there's 11 people eligible. I guess I would be shocked if 11 people took it, but I'm not averse to offering it under the same criteria as we have in the past. and I understand why, it's helpful to folks who are reaching the point where they're interested, they're eligible to retire in terms of the retirement system and taking a pension, but many folks are trying to bridge the gap in terms of healthcare costs and other costs, till they reach, Medicare, healthcare costs are a huge issue now for folks. We see that in our budget. Someone who retires has to, and isn't eligible for Medicare has to cover those costs. So I'm not averse to offering the same amount as we've offered in the past, and giving our staff that option. They certainly don't have to take it, and like I said, I wouldn't expect them all to take it, but I think it's beneficial to offer folks the flexibility if it's something that's the right choice for them to do. I'm not averse to, trying to.
So I can confirm that that they are eligible at 60 years old, full pension, in between 50 and 59. They're with 10 years of service. They're eligible for a portion, a prorated pension. So additionally, I will note that the retirement stipend that they receive with their as part of the CBA, as well as any early retirement incentive, are both calculated into the retirement calculation or formula for how they receive their pension. So say there's a $15,000 incentive, that will be added on top of their current salary, as well as a retirement stipend, as well as the sick leave buyout. So it bumps up. So anyone who started prior to 2012, which for these candidates or everyone, it's the average of their highest 3 years. So this could make a pretty significant increase.
Goes towards that.
So it's the average of the high.
Last year, right? They're gonna get 5,000
Well,
more credits.
So if it should be an incentive for someone to retire. That being said, Northampton has had a history of offering it this type of incentive, so there may be an attitude that, well, when I'm ready to retire, it'll be there for me as well. So.
I move we offer it. I'd like to make a motion that we offer a $15,000 retirement incentive for those teachers, and those teachers who will be eligible are age 60 with 15 years.
15 years of service.
service.
I second.
Okay.
Can I just ask the
Yes,
administration?
yes, further discussion, so we,
Put the amount in,
he said 15,000,
I thought you said 15 years.
Both.
15,000, 15 years.
So
of
are
s-
you confident that if 11 teachers retire, you'll be able to find 11 good teachers for this school?
Well, I've never needed to consider that before, but I'm confident we would find 11 good teachers, but, I mean, we're talking, if they would choose it, they would choose it because it works for them. We would lose fantastic teacher, we would lose
Right.
great people, okay? So that being said, we would do the best we could to
I
fill
am
them with the best
certain
people.
there are people among that group who are in critical shortage areas, which by the very nature of the positions are gonna be more difficult to fill. The problem with these kinds of discussions is you can't pick and choose your way around those 11,
Right.
right? And so, I think here's the advantage, right? We'd know early enough. We'd actually know earlier than we sometimes know, because you put dates on these kinds of programs. One of the reasons you put dates on these kinds of programs and offer them is so that we can go out and plan. So we certainly would be ahead of the curve in our search, which is to our advantage.
Okay. And I like the age 60 better than the 59 because they are eligible for the full
Yeah.
pension. So it
I
makes
think
sense to me
that's-
that
yeah.
you're offering them this benefit.
Can I suggest you modify your motion to include the December 1st is the traditional notification date?
For the CBA.
That we stick with the December
So
1st
2
date for
weeks.
notification.
Sure, so do I need to do the whole thing again, or can I just
Yeah,
say-
why don't you
okay.
just,
So I move that we offer a retirement incentive for those teachers who are age 60 with 15 years of service of $15,000 with a date of December 1st.
Notified.
Should be a quick
by
decision.
December 1st.
December 1st.
What? Sorry, Matt's.
I just wanted to, prior to a vote, I also want to just give you the cost implications. Because it's not just the $15,000, but there's also FICA and retirement that you need to pay into. So it's, each one of those $15,000 stipends is actually $18,818. If all 11 took advantage, that'd be $206,993. In addition to the normal buyout, which would be $281,359 for a total of $488,352.
The buyout numbers alone are 281.
The 281 for the CBA's
The CBA mandated.
retirement stipend and sick leave.
They're eligible for those whether they take,
Right,
whether
that's right.
whether they have
Correct.
a
That's
$15,000 incentive or not.
Correct. That is part of their collective bargaining agreement. So
Okay. So it's significant.
So what was that buyout number?
281.
359.
Sorry, Matt, what were the two numbers?
Came
That
out
with the
24.
the incentive that we're discussing would be how much?
206,993.
And the CBA portion of any buyout for all 11, again, this is for all 11 potential
Correct.
eligible
It's
employees.
281,359.
Well, we're on the hook for that part anyways.
You are.
The other component of this is technically a retirement incentive is not allowed as part of the CBA. So we will have to create a memorandum of agreements and have the teachers union agree to this. That being said,
Did we do that last year?
we did.
Oh, okay.
Historically, that is not, they have been amenable to this type of offer.
And we have every reason to believe, based on conversations that were going on during collective bargaining, that they would, of course, agree to this.
Of course.
But if they
Okay.
don't, that's their choice, just the same
It
way
would be their
teachers can take
choice.
it if
Yep.
they offer it, it's their choice.
Absolutely.
But with the new hires who would be at a lower level, the offset,
Potential.
you would offset the 480.
Certainly,
Yeah, it's
at
more
least
second
offset at
than
least some of
first,
that.
but-
Yes.
The savings, yeah, it's a 2 to 3 year payback.
Hmm.
So
Oh, there is a payback.
there's absolutely a payback.
So do we have a second for Tom's revised motion? Aaron?
I second the motion.
Okay. Further discussion. I know Greg's doing math, so we'll give him time.
I will note, I mean, I said the 281 for those 11, that is not equal.
It depends on the
Or
year
it
of
depends
service.
on their
Yeah, it's
line of
it's not.
service, so I don't,
Those numbers vary pretty wildly.
Okay.
they do,
Yeah.
so.
New,
Yeah,
higher new, it's gonna be about half the salary.
Yeah. yeah. So they're saying it's about, within 2 to 3 years, you,
Even with the 480,
Yeah.
it's a savings.
and certainly over time, there's
Mhm.
savings,
Right,
so.
Saves you a lot.
Yeah, we usually budget for an 8M, which is about $18,000 savings from Top Step, which is really all of these employees.
That's in the sort of middle of the chart.
Right,
Okay.
so, that being said, I mean, it's
Depends on
all
the-
dependent
depends on the
on how we
experience.
hire,
Okay.
so.
All right.
So this could potentially hit our nice budget.
Yeah, we'll know in 2 weeks if we approve this.
Yeah, but those salaries are also budgeted into.
We would
Yes,
adjust
the-
both,
Right.
Yeah.
so we would adjust, we'd.
Yep.
so-
Yeah. So if there were any, if this is approved and there were any, I mean, actually, even if this is approved or not, if we do get any retirements by December 1st, we would adjust for those in the budget. Again, I mentioned before, we tend to revisit this thing a couple of times.
Right.
So there were pending retirement notices that could come into play in terms of our budget anyways, so.
So the December 1st is notified by December 1st, and on December 2nd, you're SOL?
No, they finished the year.
Yes,
But,
No, no,
yeah,
if you-
and that's,
But yeah,
Yeah.
they can't
If
change
you
it,
don't,
right.
if
But
you
that's
don't get
the-
in by December
that's the
1st,
same
then you can't come in on
notification.
the
That's
4th
the
and say, oh, I changed my
Right.
mind.
but Greg, that's the same notification date that's already in the CBA.
That's right.
I know.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
I just want to be clear. We're not changing the notification date. And I believe at least once or twice in the past, we've actually had the discussion a little bit later, and we've extended it by a month or two just to see if someone would take it. So,
Yes.
but I think we're having this conversation early enough that people can make their considerations and,
I guess that was my next
Yeah.
question, is 2 weeks enough time?
If somebody's thinking about retiring, they're thinking about it.
if
Yeah.
they're
Right.
thinking
But
about
if
it,
they're
they
not thinking about it and this opportunity presents them, might they want a little more time, or?
I'm comfortable with 2 weeks.
Yeah, with the budget calendar as it stands, it's gotta be, we've gotta have the budget basically done before Christmas, because public hearings on the budget begin in early January.
Yeah.
I just think from a time frame, I know it's not that much time, but,
Okay.
so, all right, any further discussion? Questions? All those in favor of the motion? Thank you. All right. You have some written reports in your packet, beginning with the superintendent's report.
Thank you. So you have a recommendation on a policy entitled Policies, Policy Development, Adoption, and Review. One piece of good news is this policy, if adopted, actually replaces 3 others in your
Yeah.
book that come
The
out.
policy on
As
policies.
a result, and it, more importantly, creates the policy committee that the joint board authorized, so that if this were to go through first read tonight, be adopted in December, we believe we could have this group up and functioning after January 1st and begin some sorely needed policy work. Calendars, we've adopted the SAU calendar, and we expect to be working with each of the individual districts around that SAU calendar and have a proposal for you to review in December. We've started the educator evaluation work. Ann Wilson, who's a former colleague of mine, a former superintendent in Sudbury, and worked as my assistant superintendent for HR in Brookline, is working with Erin Milbury in leading that group to restructure our educator evaluation plan for the next 5 years. They've started to put together their committee, and I believe are meeting the week after next to start the work on that plan. We are going to have to make a change on emergency planning. Joe Conley, unfortunately, who was going to work with us, has a back issue and is not going to be able to help us with that. We are talking right now with SAU 16 and some of their people about helping us do that work, but we will be structuring it in the way I've described here. That is starting with Seabrook and working on our plans across the districts from there. I've been doing classroom visitations. I've given you the schedule, which I just finished today at Seabrook Elementary School. And we're also doing staff and community forums. We've completed the 2 here. In fact, we've completed all the staff forums as part of the entry plan. The next phase of that, prior to me putting together a report for January, is some meetings with students that I'll be organizing in December.
Great.
That's my
Fun
report.
one, the fun meeting.
Yes,
Okay,
thanks.
thank you. Assistant Superintendent Rona.
You can see we have a rather thick Community Matters this month. This reflects all the work that the different departments did at our SAU Day. The beginning starts with an overview of where we are in our competency journey, and a lot of it's about our quality performance assessments, and you can see several pictures, spend a lot of time in the schools with faculty and staff with their work, along with John Vandrell's, and you can see examples of kids participating where a lot of our preparation for quality performance assessments is that formative work where students are participating in some more hands-on, doing some practice, get ready to hopefully be successful, as the different types of assessments that we do also affects how we have our students practice and prepare for taking those assessments. So lots of different information here. If you look, each department contributed to that in different ways. So these are all teacher contributions. If you look at the last page, I'd like to recognize your school as being New Hampshire Blue Ribbon Award winners. as part of the New Hampshire Partners in Education that looks to foster, support, and celebrate volunteer programs. The day of the actual awards this year, several people were double, triple booked. So there was a small contingency of us that got to represent SAU 21, but certainly want to say thank you and congratulate all the parent and community volunteers that continue to support SAU 21 and particularly Northampton School.
Great. And I want to thank Dr. Carteret for picking up the award and certificate on our behalf. That was the day of our Red Ribbon Assembly. Thank you.
If you look at the last page, on the live links, which you would have received from Rhonda, these are live links to some possible drafts of quality performance assessments across different departments. I'd be happy to meet. Panicking me, but if they don't work, let me know, and I'd be happy to meet and speak with each and any one of you regarding drafts of those work.
Great, thank you. Any questions for the Assistant Superintendent? No, great, thank you. Administrative report.
Fantastic.
From our administrative team.
Thank you. So I want to add to our written report just a summary of Detective Papalardo's time with us last Thursday. She was here giving our Alice Unwelcome Intruder talks to all of our students, K through 8, and he met with the preschool teachers that Tracy mentioned before, and they'll follow up with our preschoolers as is appropriate. But Officer Pop, detective, excuse me, he's recently become detective. So Detective Pop was fantastic. Our students were very engaged, very interested, and very poignant and direct, depending upon their age, with their questions and our conversation. So he did a fantastic job. I'll be highlighting that in the Friday communication that goes home to our parents. So that's an addition. I also want to mention that outdoor education is up and running. Patrick Guidi is our long-term substitute for outdoor education. So he's filling the role that Mr. Karen worked with classes every other week. So as it's structured, Deb Vasconcelos and our outdoor education teacher alternate weeks, and so they have scheduled times, and he's doing a fantastic job. So I appreciate that. So that's definitely happening. In technology, we've had a few interviews. We are very, very enthusiastic about a candidate who I anticipate will be a recommendation coming up. So we should have, or I anticipate having someone in place and to fulfill the technology teacher position, integration specialist position early December, early next month.
Is that a new schedule, the alternating? No? Oh.
It is not, and as we've outlined in the outdoor education teacher, the .6 outdoor education teacher in the budget for next year, it will be incorporated into the unified arts schedule.
That's great.
Okay, so 3 days a week, 3 full days a week, incorporated in UA.
Okay, great.
Can I ask 2 questions of you, Dr. Anderson? The first is on the field trips. We were having a brief conversation earlier, and again, you may not have the answer tonight, and that's okay.
Okay.
There were some questions that came up about curriculum-based field trips and whether they're fully funded in our budget, or whether PAL donations are required to fund the curriculum-based trips. If you could work with Matt to figure out what that answer is, if you don't know tonight, that'd be great, because I think we have a responsibility to fully fund curriculum-based field trips, like the 4th grade, for example, or any others that you have. And just as we're in the budget process, I just want to make sure that, because my understanding is that some of the PAL fundraisers this year haven't gone off as well as they have in the past, and I want to make sure that we don't lose anything for our kids next year.
And to your point, for example, the 4th grade Gundalo field trip, is partially district funded and partially PAL or PTO funded.
That's curriculum based.
It is.
So-
Certainly
I
agree.
understand.
Whatever
So
the
thank you.
answer is okay. I just think we need to know the answer.
Okay.
And then the
Put
second
that-
thing
put
is,
that together.
just because I'm gonna keep doing this until I know where we are. Power School update. How are we doing with that?
I have that to share with you.
Amen.
Let's pass this around if you wouldn't mind.
He was just waiting for those magic words.
So, before they all come around, so volunteers, chaperones, as of yesterday, we're up to 72 at
Wow.
the PAL meeting. At the PAL meeting approximately 2 hours ago now, I heard about how successful the PAL, the coordinated PAL police department efforts were. So thanks again to PAL, Marianne Von Jess for coordinating that. But we should, within a month or so, depending upon how long the process takes, push well over 100 volunteers. Having gone from 46 a month ago to 59 2 weeks ago to 72 as of this month. Okay. So here's a narrative for our Power School rollout timeline. With an introductory paragraph of saying that we have made significant strides in our coordinated effort, especially since we coordinated with Jeremy Murphy, who is a Winnicott High School employee. We have contracted with him, and he's been very conscious and conscientious for making sure the work that he's doing for us has been outside of his commitments to Winnicott. So thank you, Jeremy. There are some other aspects like, for example, various elements of the database, including the EIS, I4C subject codes and teacher qualifications are being checked and rechecked to make sure they're accurate, complete, and in line with what's required. So those reports are primarily submitted by Kelly Ford. So Kelly's been working with Jeremy to make sure they're accurate. And all teachers are being trained, have been trained in entering student achievement. They have been trained, but some are further along than others, so that training on an individualized or small group basis is ongoing. So over the course of term 2, which begins after Thanksgiving, we will continue to work with the teachers to be fully versed, or much more adequately versed in the grade book function, which will allow us to open up the parent portal mid-March. In the interim, we are going to send home to all parents and guardians the access to the attendance and other contact information for their students, so they'll be able to log in. We'll work with parents and families to make sure that what we have and what we sent to them is accurate, that it works, that they can see attendance information, that all contact information is accurate, and so on and so forth. So kind of the several columns of the spreadsheet, if you will, the home page of what parents and families can see is accurate. And then over the course of the ensuing months, in mid-March, 6th through 8th grade parents will be able to go in and access the quick lookup, which gets you behind the scenes in the grade book, and you can drill into assignments with broken down percentages and that sort of thing.
So would we expect term 2 report cards to also be sent by mail rather than electronically?
Yep,
I don't mind whatever the answer is. I just want people to know what the expectation
so,
is.
in working with Jeremy, this is new for me. I've not been on this aspect of Power School before. For the actual printout of the report card, what Power School does is it generates an object report. It's in a PDF. So the PDF must be printed off and sent home. So there's no way for a parent to log in and generate the PDF themselves. As far as the report card, so having it look the way that it will look coming home. What will happen with the trimester 3, when our 6th through 8th grade parents are able to log on and see how the students are doing, the grades will be there. There certainly is ways that we could integrate having them do comments, but again, the report card itself, the only way for the parents to have that, because it is a PDF that's generated by the school, is for it to come home as a written document.
Which we have learned over the course of the last month.
Actually, I just learned that 2 weeks ago.
Okay, 2 weeks ago.
Mhm.
So, but mid-March, the portal will be open and parents will be able to see. It will be presented differently, but the same essential information that is included on the report card.
Yes.
So why 6 through 8 and not
So I've been doing a lot of traveling around to different districts and talking with the New Hampshire Power School Users Group, and pretty much across the board, I can think of maybe only one exception. K through 5, the feeling is that it's really not an appropriate tool because so much that's done in the elementary classroom is done by student portfolio. And of course, that information, those wonderful Friday folders where parents are constantly knowing, getting feedback from the teachers about how the students are doing, provides a great avenue for that. The types of data that we record for our students, it's very difficult to put it in a Power School format that you could check weekly that would communicate anything. The concern from most school districts is that it paints a far less than full picture of what students are doing in the classroom, where their current level of achievement is. And so it's used to generate the report card in K through 5, and as a way to communicate about more, constant updates for how students are doing in classrooms 6 through 12. That's pretty much the standard.
Well, when, it has a curriculum function on it as well as the assessment reporting too, right? So for K through, at least that's my understanding, so for K through 5, will that be where the information is posted about what's going on in the classroom, even if it's not how my kid's doing?
No, you certainly could use it to put a description for a class and to put links to, for example, the supporting documents that we have online. But it's not something that's really used that way.
Right, I mean, our hope is that that will either happen through our website. We are
Right.
planning, Becca and I
Google
are planning on working
Classrooms.
with our elementary school teachers to find some sort of portal, for lack of a better word. So I don't know if you remember the Seesaw presentation, for example, that kindergarten uses. A platform like that really can show student portfolio work that's far more developmentally appropriate for the elementary school. So it's still an electronic means that parents can tap into, but far more appropriate for our younger students.
Are any of those districts in K, are they using it for for competencies and standards even in K through 5?
For you can certainly, for creating the report card, yes. So they're set up as
Okay.
competency-based report cards, and teachers generate much like you would any other of the tools that are out there. So teachers still enter in the information about the competencies, including the comments, but it's to generate the report card that goes
Your answer to
home.
Tom had more to do with sort of a weekly way for me to check in on my,
Yes, yeah.
got
So
it.
we're all
Yeah.
using.
Got it.
And when there's standardized testing or whatever, that's gonna be in there as well, because that was part of what I think we heard, that it helps
From Jason,
from a
yeah.
data perspective,
Yeah.
right? So all the classrooms are gonna be using it, but the parents won't be accessing it to
Yes.
see.
Right.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
yes.
That's,
Exactly.
we,
That's
Yes.
unclear to me
Yes.
in this
sorry.
document.
that's a common practice. We talked about that, the curriculum administrators, curriculum instruction administrators, this morning, that most of the districts don't use it for the parent portals.
I'm okay with that. In reading this document, it made it look to me like it was gonna be used for 6 through 8, not for K through 5.
For the program.
And I just wanna make sure that, I know what's.
Yes, yeah, and the training that we were just doing that I think was mentioned in the professional development piece, that was K through 8. All the teachers came in and we were all on computers and going through how to enter in student information.
Thank you.
So,
Okay. Great.
So for the second half of the year, so to speak, like March, when parents are logging in 6th, 7th, 8th grade, what will that look like? Will it look similar to how my high school student
Yes.
is? And I'll be able to see assignments,
Yes.
quizzes, tests?
Yeah,
like
teachers can
a
make the
whole
comments
range of-
individually for the assignments or as a whole for the class,
Yeah.
yep,
Okay.
yes.
Just to speak also on behalf of the 6th, well, I can speak for 7th, the one-to-one initiative with them having their laptops there all the time and using Google Classroom, I can go on and Cameron can show me, this was my quiz, and it shows if she's completed it, it shows what her grade is. I can open it up, she can show me what the rubric was, she can show me what she got, how she scored on each part of it. So, we look at it all the time, and I will see if there's something red there, I'm like, oh, that's missing, what happened? She's like, oh, I just didn't hit submit, and she can go in and submit it, but right now, I can see where she stands in every one of her classes and all of her.
And in theory, those two systems will complement each other.
Yep.
So other districts that utilize Google Classroom and utilize Power School, they complement each other in that way. So that's great that you're already used to that.
Yeah. And then for the younger kids, with the 4th grader, my daughter's teacher has been wonderful on already sending home student reflections in a packet, to student self-assessments for ESL, for SEL. A lot of her math scores, a nice cover letter stating what this is, wanting us to review it prior to our conferences so that we have stuff ahead of time. And we are also given the option of having a conference mid-session and at the end of the term. So if we needed to get in to talk to the parents ahead of time, that was also an option, which is, to me, it's been great.
So another
Yes.
thing to consider, just from a parent whose high schoolers are using PowerSchool, is that it's also dependent on how quickly and fastidiously the teachers input. And I know in the high school sometimes, if the teachers don't get a chance to input, they'll just put ease down until they input. So, and that's
Yeah, we
that's
haven't
not good for the
even
parent who
engaged-
looks
yep.
on and goes, "What?
Yes.
What's going
Yeah,
on?"
we haven't even engaged in kind of developing norms around that. So
Yeah.
this trimester, the reason that we're not opening it up yet is this trimester is the 6th grade team is playing. We're figuring out where things are
course.
working, where the hangups are, and over the course of this trimester, we'll develop shared norms so that parents can have expectations about how often to see grades updated, what placeholders are used, because you
Yeah.
can have the missing, all those little right clicks that teachers can do to communicate to students and to parents about that. So
And students.
if you choose to
I
use
mean,
Yes.
the
it,
hope is that
Students could
our,
access
right,
it
that
as well,
our,
of
that our
course.
students are getting used to that in middle school so that they can become
Yeah.
more independent and sort of.
I
manage
could
their own
foresee an
pace.
influx of parental calls to the teachers. What's
Yeah,
what's
maybe.
going on here? What's going on
Maybe.
here?
Yeah, an extreme example is, right, parents could check 17 or more times a day, and/or students checking. So we certainly want people involved, on a daily basis, maybe not to that extent, but it'll be very helpful.
Lock them out if it's logging.
And
Yeah, exactly.
That's not an exaggeration, 17 times a day.
Oh, I don't
Say
doubt it
that.
at all.
Once that might have
Eric,
been
do you have
me.
anything else? Or are you,
I do not.
okay,
I'm sure we'll
move on to the financial report
Facilities
then.
manager later. Matt?
So included in your packet is the year-to-date
Wait,
expended.
before you go on, I just wanted to hear from you about the climate and culture, because
Oh,
that is
thank
one of
you.
our goals. Can you give us an overview on how well that you just met with Dr. Hart again?
Yeah, that was a intense but positive week. So we really peeled back layers of the onion, and in terms of our work with Dr. Hart, our teachers were given another opportunity, and in our work with her, the last opportunity to really just tell it like it is, tell us how you're feeling, what's, to Dr. Lupini's approach, what's working, what's not working, what do we really need to dig into if we're gonna dig ourselves, in a positive way. And that was it was fruitful. It was beneficial in sort of a, sort of an epiphany, if you will. So I found it very useful, helpful, and we have, I need to share it out with you folks just to give you a progress report, but we have a few action items which include competency-based education work, other continued work on our shared governance processes and procedures, largely facilitated through a task force, the Climate, Culture, and Communication Task Force. So that work is ongoing. We have to really kind of coalesce, revisit where we are, what we're feeling, and most importantly, I think our shared agreements moving forward in terms of, all right, yeah, there's all that, but we're all on the same page in this regard, these shared agreements moving forward, and we're all are going to agree as a professional community to abide by them and operate by them moving forward.
I think as someone who's new to all of this, not having been here when the work with Dr. Hart began in June, I think it was, the shared agreements that came from that first round of work with the school, she brought that, we revisited that as a group and went over it again, and everyone had a chance to give input and make adjustments to it, and then we have that for moving forward, which I thought was very informative for those of us who are kind of walking into the situation new, which there are several of us in the school, but also a wonderful chance for all of us to come to a renewed optimism and positive intent
That's good to hear.
from the perspective of a newbie.
All right, thank you. All right,
Will there be like a final report out, or how's this gonna,
Yeah, we
work?
were just talking about that with her briefly Friday afternoon, and she knows there's some work. She wants to survey the board, so that's still in process. But she knows that a report, if you will, report and recommended, next steps, is forthcoming.
And you did that climate and culture survey, that pre-climate and culture survey before Maura Hart started.
Yes.
Are you dipping in and doing that as this process is going on to see if there's any,
Yes, that went
Progress?
back out to everyone internally. It went back out to everyone, both surveys, both climate and culture surveys, went back out to everyone to review in anticipation in advance of last week. So she was here all
The
day
results
on,
of that.
all day on Tuesday and Friday. So if you're asking, are we going to ask all of that again? Yes, we intend to.
okay,
We intend to at the end of the year.
see if there's some progress.
The spring, yes.
okay. All right. Matt?
So attached in your packet, there is the year-to-date expenditure report. There are a few accounts I would like to address, the first of which is on page 3. Under computer instruction, you'll see that our technology salary account is over budget by $2,300. This is reflective of the Power School consultants that we contracted.
Okay.
Additionally, on page 4, you will see under buildings, for consultants, we're over budget by $2,500. This was to contract our roofing consultants, ARM, who developed the specifications and will be for the bid process, as well as will be managing the actual construction next summer, should the warrant article pass for the roof project that we had mentioned earlier this evening, that will be going out to warrant article. Finally, on page 6, I had also mentioned health insurance. So under employee benefits, we are over budget by $4,300. And this is just a byproduct of plan changes that have occurred since we budgeted, over a year ago. So.
Okay. Any questions for Matt? No. Moving on. Budget Committee. Budget Committee is doing its first review of the school budget on Monday, I believe. All right, Monday?
Yes,
It's coming Monday, so
Monday at 7.
everyone come and watch the show.
Town hall?
Town Hall.
So
7 o'clock.
James, I do have the year-end review
Yeah.
for that meeting, as well as the default budget
Yes.
and a PowerPoint that will present the proposed 2019-20 budget for that meeting.
And I
So,
wanted to follow up with you after, just on a few things to make sure they're included in that.
certainly.
I think might come up as questions, so. Facilities, you have your facilities report in your packet, as well as your school nutrition report. Any questions on those?
No.
Okay.
You're gonna kill me if I try to go backwards, aren't you?
Go backwards.
I'm sorry, I did have another question on climate and culture. I know we've been gone past it by 2 line items here.
I know you like to think about your questions, Greg, so
Yeah.
I'm happy to do that.
This is a little too fast.
It's from an observer who's not involved with it, it seems like a lot of the climate and culture focuses around this shared governance notion. And I think although that's a portion of it, I'm just wondering, is there more meat on the bone other than shared governance? And is the climate and culture issue because of the perception of shared governments or lack of shared governments? I see shared governments and we talk, and it gets mentioned
really
all the
big
time. And I gotta tell you that term shared governance gives me the heebie-jeebies.
Distributed leadership, shared governance,
That
distributed.
one
That's
is even
even
worse.
worse.
That's even worse.
Okay, all right. Yeah, they're related. They're definitely related to improving the climate and culture. In other words,
There are a lot of
It's ve-
attributes
it's
for
very
climate and
important.
culture.
yeah, it's very important that people are, have a voice and are given opportunities to be part of a shared decision-making process
May I?
to help improve climate culture.
I think if based on the conversations I've had with Maura, if she were sitting here in response to that, she would say, figuring out a renewed definition of that term is a lot of what people report the climate and culture issues are about.
Feels that way.
Yeah, that I think there's some recognition that it's not what it was at one point, and it's not going to be that. But there are a whole lot of people with different definitions in their mind as to what it is going to mean or should mean. And reconciling those and figuring out a shared definition is a linchpin in getting to the other issues. But people have a tough time, and I've seen it, getting past that issue.
That issue.
In getting on,
Shared governance
yes,
issue.
and what that means,
Yes.
and what that's going to mean going forward in terms of, and in anticipation of getting to anything else. I mean, I think what she said from the beginning is that those issues, the middle school schedule issue off of the summer conversations, that those were drivers. I think that was the word she actually used in all of this. So from my perspective, that's the answer to your question.
So is it the root cause, but that is some of the symptoms are communication?
Yeah, my perspective, I mean, I shouldn't do this off of entry plan interviews and whatever, but because it's too early to do that, but, and I've talked to her a couple times, not terribly recently, but yes, that's what I believe she would say.
Yeah, it feels like that. It feels like it is literally the only issue in the model. There's a lot of other sort of sprinkles on the sundae. The main part of it is the shared governance.
Well, it's shared governance during a time of change in education, which I don't think we can underestimate. No
Right.
matter what school you're in across the country right now, you're experiencing a lot of stress and anxiety around
Right.
the significant changes that are going on in education. And so we're dealing with a lot of things at one time, and I don't think that can be underestimated.
Right, I agree with
why
that.
it feels particularly challenging for us. But I also would say that the other pieces of climate and culture, I tend to be kind of positive. But
like
it's
that.
really great to see, it's really great to see even the way that teachers are trying to build and improve upon, our positive interactions with each other and support for each other. There's a renewed interest in socializing in positive ways and supporting each other outside and doing things together. So, no, I think that there are other things as well. I think the big talking points tend to be around things like the shared governance, but there's
And I
more
think
to
it also
it
gives
too.
a shared understanding about the things that we do day in and day out, so that we're speaking a common language. I think over the past few years, we started speaking, we might all say shared governance, but again, what that meant. And so I feel like Maura's really trying to help us to build capacity to say, okay, I hear what you're saying. do you mean this? So that we're really understanding what each other is saying and not just assuming, right? Not just sort of taking the quick way out.
Yeah, it's well said.
And I think that is really necessary for all of us.
No,
I think.
Yes, so
wanna
that's
make-
different than.
Sorry,
that's
and
like-
I don't wanna, I don't wanna put words in Greg's mouth, but I think the concern is around, issues we've seen in the past, not just about shared governance, but about, communication and meeting internal communication between staff, among staff, between administration and staff, between staff and parents, those issues, acceptance of and meeting expectations around new standards and new teaching practices that might be expected to be brought into the school, around, professional conduct, expectations around that and things like that. So I think all of those have been issues in the past and I think are all part of the problem. And I think, Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you're sort of getting to the point of we want to make sure that those are part of these discussions as well, because there's a lot of those issues that have that have percolated up over the last few years, sometimes in private and sometimes very publicly. And so that's all part of this climate and culture concern that folks have, I think.
I think she's working really hard
Yeah.
in helping all of us to hold one another accountable, but in a positive and proactive way, right? And that takes risk, and that takes, again, speaking sort of the same language, and when you aren't, taking the extra time to say, help me to better understand what's happening here. That takes a lot of time and a lot of energy, and really, I mean, yes, she started in June, it's just November.
Right.
So we still have a lot of time. But everybody shows up to these meetings, and that's the first step, is that we're all in a room, in a circle, looking at each other. And we're all hearing the same things from one another, from her.
And I think like the school board, for example, bringing back this position and feeling, I mean, I feel like I'm a part of the larger solution as well, and the support I'm able to give teachers, and as we navigate these really challenging times in education, to have someone like me there to help with that, I think is significant. So it's not just the work that we're doing with Dr. Hart. I think there's a lot more to it than that.
I agree with that.
For sure.
Tom?
So will the work be done at 12 months, or should this be something that we're looking at continuing in from a facilitator?
The work won't be
standpoint-
done.
No, I got you.
Yeah.
But from a facilitator standpoint,
That's a
should
different
we
word.
consider budgeting to continue her assisting us moving forward? Because it doesn't sound, it sounds like we're making some progress, right, and having common language. But and you may need to go back and talk to the teachers about that, right? If it needs to be collaborative, and that's fine.
Yeah.
I think
And
to
to
your
build
point, Bill,
on
if that work needs to continue, I think to
Yeah.
Tom's point,
Yeah.
And to build on that, do we need to expand to the community? Because we sat in this room and heard from parents about, it's not just an internal thing. It needs to be all of the legs of the stool. We have to work with the community and the school board and the teachers and the parents.
And she's well aware of that. I mean, those are definitely part of our conversations. I mean, I can tell you, I've thought that even if we don't keep her on in the same sort of intensive capacity, that we need to have some touch points with her next year. Again, it goes back to that accountability part, right? When you have somebody coming in, sort of reflecting to all of us, to the teachers, to whomever, it's really helpful. I mean, you sort of, I think, take greater consideration for it.
Yeah.
So I think it's worth considering having some touch points next year. Because I don't want this just to be seen as just another initiative just to kind of get us through. That climate and culture is something that schools have to work on all the time,
Right.
right?
We've funded it through grants this year, and so we would, as we consider for next year, that's an option for us. I want to mention one thing that I'm hearing from individuals in the collective recently that I wasn't hearing before, along the lines of shared governance and distributed leadership and that sort of thing. But Dr. Lupini reminded me of it. So I am hearing from teachers, again, both individually and in small groups, and sharing with the collective. I'm not beholden to it being what it once was. I know it's going to be different. I'm ready to work together to make what we know is the best practice for kids, and that it will be different. So, and that, in and of itself, if you catch my drift, is a very, very different attitudinally than the, it needs to be council or the Constitution or whatever iteration you want to apply to it. And I've heard that from individuals, and I've heard that from, during groups as well. So,
Great.
That's encouraging, and I hope it's sincere. You talk about accountability, and this community talked about accountability, and the teachers talked about accountability as we were going through the hiring process. And so my concern with the word shared is that it's hard to have accountability when a shared governance culture is perpetuated. There has to be leadership. Our community asks for leadership. Our community asks for decisiveness, vision. All these things come from strong leadership. Collaboration is a huge part of it, but my concern is if we evolve into one big shared community, it's going to be difficult to set a culture of leadership and action, and I guess that's kind of why I was
I
kind
think
of
the
harping on
important
it.
thing with effective distributive leadership is really being specific about who does what and why.
Right.
Accountability.
And so, right,
Right.
and so, I mean, there will be some decisions that are administrative decisions, right? And then there are other decisions that should be shared, that should be
Yeah.
distributed,
Yeah.
that should have input. And even those administrative decisions should have that input, in terms of how, but just as a touch point, for lack of a better word. So I think that's where Maura hopes to help us in terms of really laying that out. What is our roadmap for that, so that decisions can be made effectively, and it feels it's for the best of our community, and it's done with some efficiency,
Yeah.
which is my big thing, because some things can't wait.
Right.
And that's a
so-
huge part of that defining the shared governance, that's a huge piece of it, and that's to help us move forward through, again, these really difficult times in education with so much innovation going on. We need to have a roadmap for moving forward in ways that that people do have ownership of those things, whether it's the collective or the individuals.
that's one of our next steps, is she'll be helping us to craft that, so that people will understand, whether it's their voice, their feedback, their opinion, or if they're gonna really be a part of the decision-making.
Okay. Thanks
That's a
for
great
that,
question.
because we're outside of it, and we hear the little bits and pieces, and we keep hearing the same words over and over, and I guess I wanted to hear a little bit more about it, because some of it's concerning.
All right. Good.
Okay.
Ready? All right. Facilities or school nutrition report questions?
I just want to highlight something on the school nutrition, for Paula, that she is starting to host our first family luncheons, starting in November. She's starting with first grade. She hopes to do it with second grade and kindergarten, and the point is that she's sending things home to parents. They can say that they want to come. It's for a nominal fee if that's affordable, and then families come in and eat with their kids. And so she has done this initiative on her own, which I think is really, really wonderful. And it just speaks to how she is far more than really just our nutrition director. She really tries to add to the culture and climate and community building of our school. So I just wanted to point that out. I was really impressed and proud of her that she did this.
Great, thank you. No CIP update, we're off till next year. If the Winnicott County Principals Report in your packet. In your packet, we have 2 letters of resignation. As you all know, Megan Wyman resigned to take another job, as did John Gamache. Their letters of resignation are in here. As we normally do, we do in fact vote to accept the resignations, even though they've already moved on. So do we have any questions around those, or? No. Do we have a motion to accept Megan Wyman's resignation?
I'll make a motion to accept Megan Ryman's resignation.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, and we have John Gamache, who moved on to Winnicott.
Make a motion to accept John Gamash's resignation.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye, all right, thank you very much. And then finally, under policies, you have
Can we just thank those two
Yes, I'm
employees
sorry.
for the excellent
you for-
service that they have given our
Yes.
school district? They're
I
both
w- I
gonna
was-
be sorely missed.
Yes, thank you, Cindy, very well said, my apologies. And we wish them both very well in their new positions. I believe Megan went to Kearsarge, and John we'll probably see him over at Winnicott, so, or on the golf course.
So John left with a considerable, or is leaving with a considerable amount of working knowledge of, is there a transition, is
And at least he's
holding him
close by.
hostage to a transition plan?
Yes, we are.
We have, and Winnicott is
Okay.
holding him to a transition plan, yes.
Yeah, all right, thanks.
And he's always available, I guess.
Yes.
He's down the street.
Well, that's a synergy that we hope to leverage as we look at different ways that the SAU can work together. We see facilities as one of those items. So.
All right, thank you.
Yay.
So different.
As Dr. Lupini mentioned, you have the first read of a new policy, BGAA, the policy on policies.
Policies on policies and policy development.
Which, this is a first read. We just did discuss this concept at the joint board about coordinating policy development across the SAU. Not to be replicated with every school district, but to coordinate development and dissemination of policies for consistency. And this would replace 3 other policies, BG, BGA, and BGB, the old policies on policy.
I think we have the first 5 agendas ready to go.
That's a big job.
I don't know if anyone has any questions about these at this point, but we would come back for final approval at our next meeting, unless there were some concerns or questions. No? All right.
No.
That is it. We've signed the manifest. Our next meeting is Thursday, December 20th at 7 PM, unless we schedule something earlier to approve a
Unless we schedule something
something
earlier,
earlier
yes.
to approve a potential tentative agreement on the CBA.
One question on the 2 vacancies. How's the search going? And do you have, so I've heard that you have a hard time getting substitute facilities people sometimes.
Well, yes, John has used, we've used Kevin Case, who's our most senior custodian, for the day portion. But yes, we don't have very many, substitute custodians. In terms of the technology position, we've been in good shape. Yeah, we've filled that position with very capable people, but we are looking forward to get that in place quickly.
Thanks, sorry, just want to make sure.
No, that's okay.
And preliminarily, Nancy Tuttle is asked to be included in the interview team for facilities. Paula Field as well. We'll have a few
Nancy is our
teachers.
other resource of massive accumulated knowledge.
So,
It's collaborative.
yeah, you bet. So, I mean, we'll have a collaborative, inclusive process, and to the extent that, the board wants to be involved, if directly, that's up to you.
Okay. Take it ahead, Tom. Anyone have anything else to add? No? Do we have a motion?
Motion we adjourn.
Do we have a second?
A second?
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you all very much.
They canceled the,